organization or individual trying to do something new, because I've read your bachelor thesis and you're also trying to introduce something new. And now that was not as smooth as a tradition I hoped for, but I got there.
Heyo, welcome to the Industry Idiots podcast.
Hello, and now we have video. Oh my god. And people can see us.
Yeah,
what the hell?
It's crazy. I have a smoothie. Wow.
You have a smoothie? Oh, you're prepared. Okay. Did you make it yourself, or is it a bought smoothie?
Shout out to...
I only have...
You have to forgive us, guys. This is the first video episode ever. It's gonna be a little wonky.
Starting great, yeah.
Shout out to Noel Miller, because he always drinks smoothies in his podcast. So,
so I'm drinking tea then.
Yeah, we have video now. It's weird. It's weird to be able to have your face attached to the podcast. But for everyone who is listening on Spotify right now, or on Deezer, or on iTunes, or wherever you're listening to, or Amazon Alexa, wherever you're listening to podcasts, we are now also on YouTube. You can see our face. What you're hearing right now, you can also see the motions of my hands right now. And come over and check us out.
And then the eye rolling intensifies because these two dogs are finally visible.
Yeah, we're going from a lot of cuts to only a few cuts, and it's hopefully going to be a lot of fun.
We'll see how the flow of the episode goes.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how much you're doctoring normally, so I don't have as much insight into the editing process.
Of course,
it's all in your hands.
Of course, I'm not doctoring anything.
Nothing. It's perfect flow every time.
Usually, when I pick up my Game Boy Cup, and I put it on a table, like this would be something that I would be cutting out. You can't hear in the usual audio process. You wouldn't hear me putting down the cup, but now you'll be able to hear that as well.
Cheers, wait, your desk is not shielded with like perfect foam that blocks everything, like in my case?
Oh, yeah.
I'm over prepared for this.
Easy. Well, I could put it down on my CSGO Hyper-Beast mousepad. Easy.
Oh, the memories. Did you remember where you got it? I was there. I remember when we got it.
ESL1? In Cologne?
ESL1 2017, I think.
Oh man, those were the memories. 2018, I think. But it was so cool. We met a couple of guys there. We're just sitting next to them on the first day. The event was like 3 or 4 days. And we immediately got friends, of course, as it always is the case, right? And
the gaming community sticks together.
And we hung out for the entire weekend nonstop with these with the peeps. Special shout out to Sebastian, who joined the Plague Doctors afterwards.
Oh yeah, and he made the biggest move of all. He bought a gaming chair at the fair, at the convention, and didn't know how to get it home.
I remember. And we helped him fucking carry this gaming chair from Noble Chairs to not a sponsor, from Noble Chairs to the entire town of Cologne to get to his car. Yeah. It's crazy. It was fucking crazy.
Oh, the memories. These gaming events are always like a special celebratory come together thing. I don't know. Normally, the gaming community can be quite toxic in some regard, but there it was all harmony. And even though you have like these rival teams in Counter-Strike and you're rooting for your team, everyone was equally aesthetic. You have the equal highs and lows of normal sports. So there was nothing different. So it was very enjoyable.
Whoever of our listeners hasn't been to I know we're not a gaming-only podcast, but we're actually game design. But going to these esport events is really it's a crazy experience. If you can get invested in a game, or if you're in a game scene, I would say it's fucking amazing. People singing the songs,
the energy.
Yeah, and yelling on the clutches. And remember those scandals when people were in the audience were yelling flashes or smokes or where the last enemy is, and then they installed a sound booth. Crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I actually do have a thing in mind for the whole week already, because as everyone knows, the new consoles have been launching the past days. And there's this one thing that stands out above, okay, every year you have a new console, new hardware, the fidelity gets higher. But this time, everyone is totally hyped about the DualSense controller of the PlayStation and the haptic feedback and stuff like that. And you said that's the first thing you're turning off, and I want to know why. Because if you compare it to the VR controllers, where you also have haptic feedback, which you were a fan of, if I remember. So now I want to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a very good question. Before I dive into that answer, I want to say thank you for 2,500 listeners. That's something that just happened yesterday. We got the email from Buzzsprout, our podcast host thing. And 2,500 of you crazy peeps are listening to us. Maybe I should look into the camera while I'm saying this. We're still new to this. We're looking at each other while recording. Thank you, everyone out there, for making us part of your weekly routine and, just sending us nice messages. We got a couple nice messages. We got an awesome email. We got some Twitter messages. We are grinning like teenagers when we get these messages. It's crazy. It's humbling. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's super humbling.
It's amazing. And also there was we hit the number one video game design or video game podcasts in, where was it? Want to say a special
drum roll?
Please drum roll in Romania.
Drum roll.
So thank you to our Romanian listeners for pushing us to number one through liking and subscribing and upvoting and rating. It's crazy. Thank you very much.
Not sure how that happened, even though we didn't put out an episode for about a month. Took a little pre-production break.
Well, our fellow idiots
were occupied with something else.
Yeah. Our fellow idiots and the community is very supportive. So maybe that's why. So, True. Okay, to your question. That is a good question, because that would also be something I usually cut out, by the way, if I stumble upon words. Why do I not like the controller haptic feedback? Because in my opinion, if you're I don't play with the joystick in VR, right? So when it's vibrating, I feel like that it's fucking up my joystick aim. So when I'm using VR and I grab something, or I'm holding a bomb, that's about to go off and it vibrates, easy. Then I don't have a problem with it, because it directly translates to what's happening, how it would also feel in real life. But the controller motion when I'm playing, let's say I'm playing PUBG, let's say I'm playing Counter-Strike or whatever, or Call of Duty on a controller, and then I'm shooting my gun or I'm getting hit, and then the controller vibrates, the only thing that it does is it distracts me from aiming. So the same reason why you turn off screen shake in competitive games,
Yeah, okay, I can fully understand this in competitive games, but would you generally turn it off also in other single-player games? Because the game that is showcasing this a lot from the streams I saw is, of course, the new Demon Souls. And then the controller does different vibrations and different intensity of vibrations depending on the surface you are hitting. So, for example, if you're doing a sword plunge against a wood wall, then it would actually feel more, I don't know, I didn't have it in hand, but according to the streamer and according to the gameplay I saw, it feels more wood-ish compared to when you hit a stone wall, for example. So it would add to the kind of immersion and the feeling of hitting that wall in that sense, which you would get similarly in VR. So I'm very hyped about that feature. I'd love to try it out, but of course, pre-orders kind of impossible to get a PlayStation right now.
That is true. That's true. That does sound interesting, but still, yes, for story experiences, I can see that being useful and not being annoying. But on the other hand, if I think about specifically Dark Souls, Demon Souls, the Souls series, do I really want the controller to vibrate while I'm trying to iframe, dodge roll the boss attacks when I'm doing a naked no-hit run? Probably not.
But maybe you can feel an incoming boss pattern coming. For example, there's a boss thing that is stumbling on the ground and the ground starts to shake. And this is a way you can feel and see the attack of the boss coming. So it could add to your senses and awareness in the overall game space.
Very true. And maybe even a damage indicator from which direction you were shot. The controller vibrates in the bottom part when you get shot from behind in Call of Duty. I can definitely picture that being useful. Guess we gotta try it out.
Yeah, on my side, I can only see positives, but of course, the competitive thing you mentioned is 100% valid argument against having that in every game. So
Well, as long as it's optional. I mean, if you're as a designer or as a game developer, you program or you put that into your game just as an enhancement of the experience and not a core part of the experience, because we also have to think about accessibility. It's a big point, and many people right now we might be able to perfectly play everything, but what's in 20, 30 years, right? When we have a lot of old age racked up, and then suddenly we or the people right now who need accessibility options. And then when I think about that in terms of being able to turn off something like that the rumbling is not part of the game experience. I don't need the rumbling to be able to be a good player or be a player that can successfully play the game. It's fine as long as the rumbling is or the vibration is a secondary or third layer of redundant feedback. Then I'm fine with it.
I can for sure imagine it. If you're a blind person or let's say somebody who has less clear vision, not totally blind, but like I'm not sure what the English word for it is.
Blindness is a spectrum anyway.
Blindness is a spectrum. Yeah, exactly. And then you are adding the haptic feedback on top of the other visual aids you already can turn on. For example, the new Spider-Man Miles Morales and of course Last of Us Part 2 was like got a lot of praise for all the accessibility options, and adding that as another layer just, I mean, it doesn't hurt anybody else. You don't have to turn it on, but it greatly enhances the experience of the people who otherwise wouldn't enjoy the game as much.
Yeah, but so don't only think into one direction of feedback. Sorry for interrupting. It's of accessibility. Yes, the blindness scala would profit from this very much. So have it in for people with eyesight disabilities. But on the other hand, if you're mechanically disabled, or you have maybe you have to play. I've seen some people who have to play with the controller lying on the table, who have to play with bigger versions of the controllers and whatever. And if that's on the table and it's constantly vibrating, you can't turn it off. That's going to be first of all super loud, and it's going to slide around. It's not something that should be there for this kind of person. So
yeah,
I think adding modularity and being able to turn it off, turn it into a super mode, turn it completely, this is what feels important.
Isn't Microsoft pushing super hard in this adaptive controller realm and investing a lot for like getting disabled gamers the modular controller they want? And if you combine that with a new level of haptic feedback, I think that could be a game changer for a lot of people.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not aware of Microsoft's efforts, but I'm sure they are. Sure, they're pushing for it.
The good thing is, or not the good thing, but the interesting thing is that the new Xbox Series X controller doesn't have anything like that. It's just the standard-ish vibrations you have in a controller, and I'm not sure that you can patch something in there via I don't know if the motors of the vibration are not supporting the directionality of the haptic feedback. Then I think just from the controller side of things, if you want to think in console wars, then you have a clear winner in that sense. Are you planning on getting a new console?
Well, I would love to.
At some point?
At some point, yes, for sure. We've had this discussion before on the show. I'm an opponent of exclusivity. I have to be honest with that. Even as a game designer, even someone who's maybe going to work on Sony titles in the future, while I'm of course able to work on them and with no problems, I am just not a fan of these exclusive contracts. I think it's overall hurting the consumer base. It's hurting everyone. The only thing that it does is it creates a vacuum that draws people to your console, to your hardware for the wrong reasons. People should be coming to your hardware because your hardware is the best. You're building the best hardware. They shouldn't come to you because you're holding them hostage because your favorite game or the game you want to play is only available on this other console.
I mean, if the community outcry is big enough, then maybe people will open up their exclusive content, just like Oculus did with, or let's not say Oculus, just like EA did with their Respawn title, Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. It's also no longer an Oculus exclusive.
Oh, really? That's good news. That's awesome.
So I think some companies are just going to give in to the pressure if the pressure is big enough. But
I wonder if that pressure...
or maybe they just changed the life cycle of their exclusives. Because if you look at Sony and Horizon Zero Dawn, now also on PC since half a year, it only took them 3 years after the game came out. But after all, it made it on the platform of Steam. And I'm wondering if the studio itself was pushing for it because they wanted to have it on PC, or if it was a business move from Sony and they're planning on doing that for a couple more titles.
It's a good question, because what I see is, especially with EA's timing, when they released all these titles for all the other platforms, it also revived their player bases, right? You have you have a huge influx in players from Steam, from these Game Passes come in, and that helps your game, right? It helps your community, it helps your game, it helps build back. I mean, EA has some image problems, or had some big image problems over the last couple of years. So all the efforts they can do to make a positive impact in the eyes of the community, in the eyes of the gamers, is probably a good decision to make.
And I can also think of another reason is because you mentioned get the people familiar with your IP. That could be the main reason why they even put it on PC, because they have a sequel lined up for the PlayStation. And maybe some PC gamers have missed out on the current generation, or now we have to say last generation, because as of yesterday we have a new current generation.
Hey, very cool.
Yeah. So with Horizon's Frozen Wilds, I think is the name, coming out, and then not having too many players who are maybe familiar with it, and having the opportunity before getting a PlayStation 5 to check out the game on a different console, and then becoming a fan of the character or a fan of the world or the game itself. That could also be one of the reasons why they did it.
What are you looking forward to when it comes to the new consoles? What's your number one awaited? I mean, yes, we've already had console exclusive episodes in the past when they were announced, but now that everything is clear.
Well, one thing would be to have the previous games that are already out there in a more remastered fashion, like having higher frame rates for the games that would theoretically now support it. For example, having, I don't know, an Uncharted game at 90 FPS or at 60 FPS and not only at 30 FPS anymore. I mean, the PS4 with the Pro and Performance mode already supported that, but for some titles towards the lower end of the life cycle of the current generation, for example, Ghost of Tsushima or Last of Us Part 2, they, I think, were running at 30 FPS or even below and kept like that. And now having the possibility to have these games run even smoother and more PC-like in a sense, that's the biggest prospect for me. I'm not specifically hyped about higher resolutions or PSVR 2.0, while that could also bring a lot of new users to the VR world, which is generally a good thing for us. So I think the higher fidelity of previous games is the number one thing why I like the new console generation and want to be a part of it while getting one of the either. I haven't made up my mind yet. So let's see, because both are not available anyways.
Yeah, true. But if I would get one, it would probably be, even though this is all an if. This is all an if case. If I would get one, I would want to get one that is a PlayStation, because I do love Ratchet & Clank. I do love the Souls-like series. But of course, it's conflicting with my morals that I don't want to support a structure that like they are winning me over through exclusives, but it's not something I want to support. So I'm kind of torn between fences, I'd say.
That's exactly the reason why I brought up the controller. Now they're also offering hardware on top of their exclusives to make an argument for their games.
Which is great,
yeah. Can have the most immersive experience for a game on that console, supported by the hardware. So.
Well, long-time listeners will know that my number one, as you said as well, my number one concern is having high refresh rates. I don't care about having 4K or 2K or 8K. I don't care. Just give me fluid gameplay. Give me no motion. Give me the option to turn motion blur off on console across all titles, no exceptions, and give me 120 hertz or 144 if possible.
If you take away the motion blur and smoothing options for the lower end lifecycle games, then you'll see that those are at the edge of using every inch of available RAM and GPU power.
For sure. I'm sure they are. But I'm not saying that they should do that with the base model, right? They could have a normal model and a crazy gaming enthusiast model. I want to say all the core stereotypes.
The $2,000 PlayStation.
Why not? Why not have something like that? Yes, splitting up the market, but how is there an overlap anyway? How is the same person who is going to buy the $400 PlayStation the same target group as the guy who is going to buy a $2,000 PlayStation to get to things where
it's definitely not the same target group.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, making both target groups satisfied with the same game experience and not compromising on one side. The people who then buy the $400 console will always then be complaining about, why can't I have this for the same price? I want to play it. It's possible. Why does it cost as much? So
yeah, but people are going to complain
I'm not
anyway.
Sure if it would help.
They're going to complain anyway. We are complaining right now, so everyone's always going to complain. So just push for innovation. Push the industry forward. Push gaming forward. Push. Just make new things happen, and they're trying. They're doing it. So no hate.
Yeah, and they are not the only thing, or the only type or group or organization or individual trying to do something new. Because I've read your bachelor thesis, and you are also trying to introduce something new. And now that was not as smooth as a tradition I hoped for, but I got there.
Brilliant. Brilliant
pushing
transition.
Up my moderator skills a little bit.
Yes. Usually I do the moderation in our episodes or in our guest episodes as well, with all the prep and everything. But I do like when you do that. It's cool.
But no topic preparation. We have to.
No, some.
Highlight that.
We don't want to dive too deep into the behind the scenes stuff. Maybe we do a behind the scenes video at some point, but not right now. Not on indie episode.
A video of the video of the video. Let's go.
A bachelor thesis. Yeah, you said it. It's right behind me. I don't know if you can see it in the final YouTube cut, because I am going to take the middle part of my video and I'm going to take the middle part of Sven's video and I'm gonna put them next to each other. You'll see it as you see it right now, and we are hopefully going to look at each other and somehow also look at you. It's a learning
work
experience.
In progress, yeah.
And so the bachelor work is behind me, and I just finished, and I'm so happy that I'm finished. I can't publish it yet because if you write a thesis and you are finished and you print it out, you hand it in, you have to wait until the official defense. You have to defend your thesis. Since you're breaking new ground, you have to academically defend your thesis. And then afterwards, on a successful defense, you're allowed to publish.
But what was this thesis about anyways?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
I mentioned the new thing you were introducing, and now drum roll again. What did he introduce?
I'm pushing for, as you know, responsive narratives. I'm trying to innovate responsive narratives. I'm trying to break into open world narrative design. And what I'm innovating with my new term is the storytelling through the environment and setting up of forthcoming pieces. So the title of the thesis is Environmental Foreshadowing, which is also the title of the new narrative design term that I have come up with. So what it does, or what the entire point of the thesis is to provide game designers, narrative designers, level designers out there in the industry, doesn't matter if indie or AAA, provide them a new tool for their belt, essentially, for their tool belt, to use to effectively and efficiently structure narrative payoffs and bring those to the player. Think of Would You Kindly. Think of all that setup that has gone into that to the big reveal. Think of all the Chekhov's guns that you've seen throughout your gaming history. Think of all the things that level design is foreshadowing, right? With the weenies, with the landmarks, all of these together under one umbrella term in the context of narrative foreshadowing through the environment.
Yeah. Umbrella term is a a good thing, because as you mentioned, there are these small sub-techniques of the umbrella term, of course, already kind of in a sense established. But having this umbrella term, and then I think that makes it much easier to communicate a certain goal you have when designing something, when you're handing off a goal you have while designing something to somebody else, and then using this umbrella term, I think it makes it much easier to steer some people in the right direction, which you of course want to do as a narrative game designer. So I think it could be quite the effective tool.
Hopefully that's the intent. We'll see. We're currently, maybe we can't talk about it too much yet, but a little teaser is always fine, I would say. As some people might know, Sven is also working on his thesis, almost done, and together we are doing a project that is supporting our thesis's arguments, so we can hopefully prove with this that what we are, breaking new ground, what we are putting out into the game design world, in the game development, attempting to put out in the game development world, holds ground.
Yeah, on my side, just as you mentioned, don't want to get into it too deep because I haven't finished it. I'm also having it to hand it off and run through the same process as you. Not gonna leak anything before it's out there. But of course, I think I mentioned it in a previous episode, I'm focusing on level design and virtual reality. And ultimately, the goal is to have, in the end of the thesis, a couple of guidelines and things to be aware of or things to mind when designing levels for virtual reality, which differ from if you would design a level for non-virtual reality, of course. And there are a lot of things going into the direction of player matrix and little guidance techniques and stuff about immersion and all the different topics that are experienced differently when you have virtual reality gear on, akin to controlling the game and the traversing and experiencing the environment via a mouse and controller or keyboard and mouse. So it goes into this direction, and maybe I think you planned on turning that into a blog post in some way. Maybe I'll do the same, copying that approach. We'll see. Just as a little summary, not all of the 60 pages or 70 pages, because nobody would read that, of course. So a condensed highlight version, maybe, if there are any highlights. We'll see.
Same here. I want to condense it down. Don't want to push all the 40, 50, whatever pages onto the internet, but I'm going to cut it down to an easily digestible, for it to be a tool that can be used by people need to, of course, fundamentally understand how to use it and its techniques, but also it needs to be like quickly understood. Someone needs to read it and be like, okay, now I know what environmental foreshadowing is. I can use that. Which techniques can I pick? And then there's an assortment of techniques they can choose from.
Did you make an infographic about your term? Because every tool needs some kind of infographic
I did.
Or I don't know, visual definition of how it works.
Yes, I did a custom infographic. I don't know. I can't pull it up because it's still. Now we can pull things up on the screen because we are also on YouTube now. Sorry to our audio-only listeners, but not pulling it up because I am not allowed to yet because I haven't defended it, and defense is in January.
True.
So
fair enough.
But I would love to share that right now. Well, in the future.
I think what we can share a little bit is about the practical project, what we're thinking, what we want to do, and stuff like that.
What we're already doing.
Which we're already doing, and we're hard at work, basically. Today I made a train move through the environment, which was very successful moment. I was super proud.
Dude, it's great. Dude, don't sell yourself short. Getting a train platform to work in the Source engine is not the easiest task.
Well, as with everything, you just need to know where to look for and what types of tools the engine gives you and provides you, and then be comfortable or be able to utilize them in a way that supports your makeshift solution. I mean, if you can accomplish what you want to do with maybe the wrong methods, but you get the point across, then it's already a success, I'd say. I mean, you will always have maybe somebody else who will rework that stuff or do it in a more sophisticated way, but for the purposes of prototyping, and I mean, we're still in the blockout phase, it's exactly what I wanted to accomplish. So that's already a little victory. And you're always, with the process of trying out and makeshifting something, you will always learn something new. So that was nice.
So I do have a question for you regarding that. First of all, a little context, a little framework. We are working on a standalone Half-Life Alyx mod. So we are doing a VR experience of sorts, and it's hopefully going to be awesome. We're still, as Sven said, in the block out and planning phase. I'm currently world building and designing the narrative and the how you discover the story and so on. And Sven is working his level and also world design magic. And then hopefully we'll have an amazing experience. But so to my question, how have you found the working with the Hammer editor, working with all of the tools that you're used to from Counter-Strike? How have you found that to work the same way or differently in VR?
Well, the transition from Source 1 to Source 2 on one hand is immense, regardless of if you're designing for console, for desktop, or for VR. Because the playtesting workflow is basically the same. You compile the map and then it loads in engine. And if you have the VR gear installed, you are playtesting it in VR, of course. And if you're not attached with the VR controls right now, which I currently not have set up in my room right now.
And so Valve Index is behind me. It's hiding behind my chair.
Yeah. It's hiding a little bit.
There you go.
Not sure if people will see it. Okay, you moved into frame. Perfect. Little humble brag.
Humble brag? I don't know if owning an Index is a humble brag. But it's not a brag. It's not intended to be a brag. Yeah. It's just I'm a tech enthusiast, and if it means that I have to eat ramen for 60 days straight, then that's what I'm going to do. But sorry, continue.
There will be sacrifices, of course.
Sacrifices for good tech. Yeah.
For good tech.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
What do I want to say?
Source 2.
Oh, yeah, Source 2. Playtesting VR, non-VR. And the difference is just you can still playtest the game with a normal player controller. Because if you don't have the VR gear connected, it will load you in with the classic Half-Life 2 controls, for example. So with a keyboard and mouse, you can still run around the environment. You do have different player metrics, I believe. So different walking speed, different jump height, and all the different stuff, which differs in the traversal and interaction, of course. So you wouldn't be able to test if that button I placed in the environment really moves according to if you press it or not. Mm-hmm. And you would have just the button toggle basically by pressing the E key, for example, in the classic Half-Life non-VR control scheme. So that differs a little bit. So you can't really prototype the real physics interaction side of things if you don't have the VR gear in there. But you can, like, the overall flow through the environment, that is something you can for sure playtest when you don't have the VR gear in there. So just running around the environment and pressing all the makeshift buttons, seeing if the scripting you do in the level even works. That is basically the main difference. And if you want to get started on the difference between Source 1 and Source 2, then you could sit here for hours. I mean, it took Valve itself, I don't know what they say in the Half-Life Alyx final hours, 8 or 9 years until the Source 2 was production ready, something like that.
Crazy.
That was one of the main reasons why they didn't get a game out in the span of, I don't know, 2013 to 2019 was the last one, Dota Underlords, I think, or Artifact even. Like, they always said, the engine wasn't ready, wasn't production ready, and they were still working on the engine. And then they had these 10 or 12 game prototypes at various stages, and none of them saw the light of day, in a sense.
Yeah.
So that they took their sweet time to get the new engine ready, but I'd say it was worth it. And I was also hoping for that they would put it into their other games. It is in Dota 2, of course. They ported it to Source 2, but it isn't in Counter-Strike. So for Counter-Strike and for the old Half-Life games, you still have to use the old editor toolset, which is, compared to the new toolset, of course, kind of a core, because you don't have all the quality of life changes you would expect for the mesh editing and moving around game objects. And I mean, one thing that's still bad for the Source engine is the compile time. Everyone is complaining on it on Twitter that is talking about Half-Life Alyx. I mean, just for the one prototype map I was building today, it took about, I think, 55 minutes. And there was basically one room, a slope to the mountaintop with some makeshift pines in the form of cones, basically.
Yeah.
So nothing really extensive. And that took 55 minutes. So,
And then you think about baking a light map in Unity or in Unreal, it's taking 10 minutes for the entire game.
Oh yeah. And it was only like the light map of having 512 instead of the 4K light map or the 2K light map. I mean, you don't need a 4K light map, but still, if you would do that, then probably it would take 4 times or 10 times. It would just multiply into infinity. So we would get to the point where we would also need to install all the toolset to a render farm or something, because my PC wouldn't be able to handle it from a certain point. The other mod I'm working on is also got quite extensive, and it's if your toolset is not supporting playtesting the moment you click play, then you are slowing down your developers. I know the toolset could be super efficient in the way once everything is compiled and it makes the game workable. It makes the game run on different system specs. That's nice. But if your developers have to wait for too long, basically, to test the one little change you did in the scripting, maybe, then that gets kind of annoying.
Tedious, yeah, it's a tedious process.
Yeah, tedious is the right word. I mean, there's an option where you can click build entities only, which would only compile not the world stuff, not the meshes or the terrain and stuff like that, and only the props and all the scripting. But still, that would also take a lot of time in that engine. So if your toolset doesn't support immediate playtesting, then I don't know, that there's still room to improvement, despite all the great new changes the toolset offers.
All right. I mean, isn't this for all the tools though? Of course, there's always going to be one downside. If you push for what is the Source engine known for? The Hammer editor, the new one, Source 2. You have these amazing placing physical objects, right, with actual physics on gravity. So if you
the holding the thing and letting it drop somewhere and then it falls.
You take a bottle, and as the level designer in the level editor, you take a bottle and you drop it on the table and it falls, and it's, how you would intuitively do it anyway. And no pixel matching with where the bottle is exactly sitting and then hitting play and seeing that the bottle is jittering around because it's glitching into nothing of that. And that's awesome. That's cool. And these kind of features, they are really pushing innovation here, because none of the other editors have those features. So,
at least not Unity. I couldn't say for Unreal.
Also true, yeah. We're not really like, we've dabbled in Unreal, but we're no Unreal experts, not even close. So, yeah, and these features are awesome. So they are innovating, and maybe on the road to innovation, the baking the light maps got left behind, and that's okay, as long as it's still somewhere on their radar, and if that's even still a possibility to be fixed. Right? Who knows the architecture of the engine?
Maybe they took a branch at some T-junction, went down a pathway where there's no return now.
Exactly, that's what I mean. Yeah, sometimes you just get too deep into one architecture, and then reworking the entire architecture is just not worth it.
I mean, they're advertising it themselves in the developer wiki that it takes a lot of time, but they're also arguing for it. It's remarkably efficient once it's done. So that's the trade-off, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah. Are you looking forward to get started with the tools?
Yeah, for sure. It's still gonna take a while, because I first have to write and make the narrative. But looking around inside the engine and what can be used for storytelling in such a small time frame was interesting already, and haven't figured everything out yet, because there's just so many assets in Half-Life Alyx. But it's definitely going to be a challenge. I'm looking forward to playing around with it, but I'm mainly looking forward to writing the story. I have to be honest.
Yeah, I think the engine itself perfectly suits the kind of topic you are going for, because the Half-Life games and the Source engine always had this big emphasis in the gameplay on
setup, on foreshadowing.
On setup and foreshadowing, showing how you interact with certain environments, with certain mechanics in the environment before you even use the mechanics, and seeing and being showcased some certain use cases and how to apply the mechanics in certain situations, and also having the whole physics engine in there and supporting like every object is basically in a way easily scriptable and has access to every function in a sense.
Mhm.
So you can makeshift a lot of stuff in the source engine, which is always super cool. You just have to know which functions exist, of course.
Well, we'll find out.
Yeah. But I think the engine is the perfect fit for trying to prove something in the realm of environmental foreshadowing.
Thank you. Because also what I wanted to say is what I kind of mentioned earlier, but it's an important point. Even though, as you've called me earlier, I am a narrative game designer, this is something that works, or is an umbrella term that works for all the disciplines, right? It's not only focused on story and narrative, because in environmental foreshadowing is used throughout games, right? You have in Half-Life, you have these red markers everywhere, right? That we have analyzed at some point that indicate interactability. Then you have this famous scene in Half-Life 2 when you come into Ravenholm and there's this zombie cut in two pieces at the wall. You know, there's a zombie on the wall like
by
this.
The saw blade.
And there's a saw blade below the zombie. So the foreshadowing here is you get there. I don't know if you have the gravity gun.
You just received the gravity gun, basically. That's the next level, next combat encounter after receiving the gravity gun.
Okay, so you just got the gravity gun and you haven't maybe figured out how it works yet. And then you see this zombie being cut in half with a saw blade prop at the wall. So what this does for you is, first of all, it tells you a great story. It tells what happened in this room. It's also scary. It's also cool looking, totally unique. And then suddenly it also tells you, wait, if someone was able to cut the zombie in half with this prop, maybe I can too. I just got this new thing. And then you try it out and you realize you can pull props, and then you try to pull the saw blade and bam, you make the connection. And this is a mechanic foreshadowing through the environment. So it's not only narrative.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly, in then one scene right next to the zombie, basically, there's the way to proceed, basically. Mm-hmm. And that is also completely cluttered and stuck with all the saw blades. So it basically, the environment, I think you could crouch, but it like takes a lot of time and it's you have to jump in the right angle and do this jump crouch thing and cross mechanic usage, which not all players will probably be able to utilize. But basically the saw blades are also forcing you in a way to now, okay, this is the moment where you have to pull out the saw blades from the wall, use the gravity gun, and having both situation directly, immediately placed to one another, and then you're maybe making the connection.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also heavily emphasized. And of course, before you even can proceed, once you pull out one of the saw blades, then a zombie behind you awakens, basically, which then immediately, okay, this is your first move against one enemy. In the next room, you will have to utilize that against two enemies, and it gradually, rationally, basically increases. So they're only trying to teach you this with a certain amount of safety, then they're adding an enemy, then they're adding a higher challenge, and gradually until you're probably getting tired of using that mechanic at some points. Well, I never got tired of using the saw blades and shooting people with it. Fair enough. It's just too much fun. But yeah, you probably get what I'm going for here.
Yeah, and you also said while you were telling the story, you did like this motion. You just you did this motion, and this is exactly what in traditional literature, if you're setting up a literary device, which is Chekhov's gun, something like this. If you're setting up a plot point or something, and you then bring it back later, the player has this, or the reader, the consumer of your media has this aha moment, right? This, oh wow, oh yeah, totally, I get it now. And this makes the player, makes the reader feel smart, but in reality, it's just you placing the things so they feel smart, right? And this is part of this. Part of it's a very thin line between agency, giving the player agency so they love your game, so they feel like it's their story, their character, their baby, their game, their playground. And then on the other hand, delivering a linear or an understandable narrative to them. So you have to find a balance through how much agency can you take away from the player to deliver a great narrative, set up good payoffs, while also not boring them or taking away their freedom so they feel trapped or don't feel like this is their game. So it's a very, very fickle difference.
It's a thin line between incentivizing you to use a certain mechanic or go a certain way and forcing you to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they never force you to use a specific gun. They just, okay, it would would be fitting here if we would do that. It would look at this environmental foreshadowing, basically.
Thank you for already using the term. Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, there's multiple of these fights, internal design fights, I'd say. There's agency versus predetermined story with meaning. Then there is what you just mentioned when... sorry, what was the last point again? I lost my thought.
That they're never most of the time never forcing you to use a certain mechanic, just incentivizing versus forcing.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of thing, which is you don't want to. I remember what I want to say. If you tell some, how's this called in English? In German, it's von oben auf jemanden herabreden.
Look down on somebody. I don't know.
Something like this. If you're condescending, that's the word I was looking for.
Condescending language, yeah. True.
So if you're always fighting against, don't design your tutorials, don't design your teaching mechanics as in a condescending way. You don't want to force it down the player's throat. And Half-Life and all of Valve is amazing at this.
Unless you make a meta joke about it in your portal, and then okay, put this cube here. It will die.
Well, that's funny. But in all the other games, they're masters at this. They're amazing at teaching the player mechanics without them realizing they are being taught those mechanics.
Yeah.
Best example is Russell's lab, right, in Half-Life Alyx. There's literally someone who is giving you the instructions in direct exposition, who is telling you, this is how it works, do it. But you as a player, you don't realize that this is the developer essentially giving you a text prompt which says, press F to use this thing. But in reality, it's Russell. You have this awesome dialogue with him. He's bantering, he's making fun of you a little bit, and it's just awesome.
And enlightening the learning experience.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So, yeah, this was a long
as
rant.
As you mentioned, it was a long rant, but
go
a
ahead.
Satisfying end.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned Ravenholm before, and I played it a lot during research for the thesis, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the standout levels where I constantly thought, like, from room to room, they have something which triggers this aha effect you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also something that keeps you going, of course, through the game. If you constantly have this, I am very smart.
Mm-hmm.
When the way I'm utilizing and making the connections in the environment, and the way this is paced throughout the game, and like there's a small drop of you showing what you can do basically here and then there and then there, and it's not really drip feeding is the wrong word, I guess, but they're constantly, how do you say this when you put a stick and there's a fish on the stick in front of the dog, basically they're still holding you something in front of
a fish on a stick in front of a dog. I know what you mean with the donkey and the carrot, right? If you this constant motivation,
and it's constantly something else. It's not the same carrot in that metaphor, but there's like, and when playing these levels, I immediately thought about what I read previously, that they only do games when they really see a reason behind it, when they really have something new to showcase. In that sense, back in the day, it was, of course, the Source engine and the new physical capabilities, and they went completely wild with in every direction of the Source engine, in every direction, every physical thing you could imagine and trying out, it is in there, basically. So that's probably also why it took so long for Half-Life Alyx to come out, because they didn't have the right motivation or the right reason to push any interactivity in terms of physics forward. So,
and I think
Ravenholm in itself is great.
Ravenholm is amazing. And I think they were also kind of waiting for the index. I think this was like a balance thing. They wanted to have new amazing hardware, and they want to prove this new amazing hardware with this new amazing tech and game.
Exactly.
So probably both developed at the same time, and then just pushing each other's deadlines and limits. And then you have some amazing new tech or something that you need in Half-Life Alyx, what the game designers came up with, the game developers. And then the hardware doesn't have that. So now they're maybe putting something new or reworking something in the index controller, or bringing a new feature into the index, and then the Half-Life game hasn't used that index function yet. So I think this was kind of a back and forth as well until they reached this equilibrium of mechanics versus hardware and tech.
So what you're saying, they're waiting for the Index 2 or the next mixed reality device until the next Half-Life comes out. Now we have to wait another
Half-Life
15 years.
confirmed, yeah. No.
Yeah.
I think the next step in the tech, in a VR tech, will be wirelessness and getting rid of this huge cube that you have in front of your head, maybe with counterweights, and then you have 50% behind, 50% in the front. Something like that.
Yeah, or having a wireless modular extension for the Index would for sure that would be nice.
Yeah, definitely something we're missing when we're playing Pavlov or the other games.
On the wish list.
On the wish list, indeed.
I'm just remembering one of the things they also wrote in Jeff Keighley's Half-Life Alyx Final Hours, where they said that now working on Half-Life Alyx again, a lot of the Valve developers now have like this rejuvenated, newfound love for Half-Life, which was probably always there, but just got reignited. And now they have all been wondering basically, okay, how could a modern day Half-Life look like that's not in VR? And so that's maybe probably the next thing they're doing is a proper next Half-Life non-VR game, or even a hybrid game, which you could decide. I mean, they have the tech for both, and then providing a playground for both control schemes, which would be kind of the challenge, I'd say. Because there are differences in VR level design and normal level design. I
have to share my honest opinion. I don't think Valve, and this probably is going to age like fine wine, but I don't think Valve will ever release a sequel to Half-Life 2. Ever. What they will do is maybe spin-offs, same universe, prequels.
Mm-hmm.
I don't... Gabe Newell
They tried it 2 times.
Gabe Newell is so fed up with Half-Life 3, I think. I feel this is how he presents himself everywhere, right? That he's aware of the memes and all of this kind of stuff. Maybe we should send him an email. I know that he answers to his emails sometimes to people who write him, no matter what they're about, and that's kind of cool. I don't feel like there's ever going to be a sequel to the Half-Life series with the same character, but who knows? Hopefully.
Yeah, that's a good point. They like I said, they tried it 2 times and they abandoned it because Source wasn't ready. There's a new engine. So there was definitely something in the pipeline, but maybe that was overly ambitious.
Well, they have high quality standards. Wasn't the Arcane Studios, weren't they working on a Ravenholm kind of game as well? And that got scrapped too?
Yeah, something like episode 4 or episode 3 of the sequel episodes.
Maybe it's just
meet
us.
Father Grigori again.
Oh, maybe it's just us loving spooky stuff. It's just why Ravenholm is so
the
cool.
Half-Life universe.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the biggest fan of the color palette. These East European rundown city slums, essentially, and everything is gray or brown. This is not my favorite part. But then again, you have these moments like in Half-Life Alyx where you come into the sewer and the walls are all in UV infrared or whatever light, and you shine and they're all glowing runes and everything is flying and suddenly beautiful, amazing. Inside this very bland color palette setting that usually is, this is a awesome dynamic they're presenting.
That's also what I noticed when playing Half-Life Alyx. There are not a lot more VFX and magical things around the player than compared to Half-Life 2. I guess that's the reason that the engine could afford more nowadays and this hardware could afford more nowadays.
Mm.
Well, that's what's one of the more difference, that you have a lot more stuff coming towards you in your direction than you are as the player moving towards something. Of course, you're always on this path. You're always on this roller coaster ride, basically, and left and right. There's the combine, and you're transitioning to the next area. Yeah. But in a room itself, you have a lot more enemies having not agency, but having the goal of getting close to the player. But I guess that's also something you want when being in VR, having something that grounds you more in this immersion feeling of being in this actual place.
And this is, I think, the exact reason why they're doing it with these, I don't want to say boring settings, but these very, very, maybe a more fucked up version of everyday life. If you're going, I don't know, if you're going to go into, I don't know, a city or an industrial area, it's going to look exactly like that. And maybe that gives the magic and the alien stuff a way bigger impact on you as a player. if you're in this VR space and you go through essentially what is the same areas and city areas that you go through in real life, and then you suddenly encounter these organic alien structures that are growing over everything, and you have these particles in the air, and you're almost afraid to walk through it, because in real life, if you walk through something like this, you wouldn't want to breathe that. And so I feel like this is why it hits harder in the Half-Life world, these magical parts of the story.
I think when you're talking about non-player characters in VR versus non-VR, there's also a big difference. For example, headcrabs or zombies are way slower in Half-Life Alyx compared to Half-Life 2, because in Half-Life 2, of course, you have the ability to sprint and have all the strafing and jumping, bunny hopping, and you're really maximizing this movement flow and jumping through the environments, and you are very much more pinpointy in your actions in a sense. And in VR, you are much slower, you're constantly reorienting yourself, basically. So, of course, the enemies, headcrabs themselves, for example, are moving through the environment slower. They are jumping in longer intervals, basically. The antlions you will encounter later in the game, you can, for example, shoot off their legs to make them move slower. And if you remember Half-Life 2, they were like super speedy creatures when moving through the sand and stuff like that. Same for the Combine. They are also slower. They're not running towards you, and they are slowly moving towards you and aiming the gun and stuff like that. So it's very interesting to see where all these parameters have been fine-tuned to make the VR experience much more, bearable, and even being able to being handled by the player. I don't know what's the correct spelling.
People will understand. They have dealt with our sometimes Denglishness for the past 31 episodes, so they'll manage one more time. And well, do we still have something to talk about according to the podcast while we're nearing the end? Maybe, of course, another wholehearted thank you. Just that we are able to do this with video now, and that you guys are maybe. Oh yeah, we have a new call to action now. Hit that subscribe button. And
ring the bell. Of course.
Well, I do have I do have like 6 or 7 channels I'm subscribed to where I actually have the bell rung. One of them being Good Mythical Morning. Love them. Love those guys. So positive. And
are you instantly getting watching the video then, or is it just to be reminded of? Because normally, if you're not subscribed to 200 channels, then you would the subscribe area would be enough to discover new videos. Or
for this particular instance, for the GMM guys, I do watch those immediately if I can. Not because I'm like a fanboy in this regard, or as you would classically think of if someone immediately watches a video. But they're amazing guys. They have this very positive show. And I just love having it on, and it's just a positive feeling. It just brings a smile to my day. And I hope we do the same for our listeners, our community. At least that's what we're aiming for. Thorsten Becker once said or called us. He wrote an awesome, wonderful Twitter comment and tagged us in it, where he said that it's like we're sitting on the couch at his place or with him. And this is how it sounds listening to the podcast. And I think this is exactly what we're going for. Professional design opinion, but also, being there with you and together.
Yeah, well, hopefully through the video now, the couch feeling is being much more conveyed or intensified in a sense.
Yeah.
We have now a higher immersion podcast. You are now with us. Of course.
Now I can't cut out the cringe anymore. How are we going to survive? Oh, man. Yeah, so that's really, really cool that we are. I hope this feels the same way. We don't know yet. This is the first episode we're producing. I'm just super excited how it's going to look, and we have a couple of awesome guests coming up. Maybe we can talk about those, or just a little tease. Okay, maybe let's not tease it yet.
Maybe. Well, we definitely have 2 guests coming up in this month, basically.
Yeah.
So, and also one for December, I think. So there's definitely something you can look forward to.
And they're working on games that we
maybe also
love.
a little treat towards the end of the year. We'll see.
Yep, we are working behind the scenes on that. We'll try. We can't promise anything, but we'll try to bring a little Christmas magic into your lives. And we will also have a couple of guests who are awesome and who are working on games that are awesome. Yep. And hopefully this will...
Which you will also be able to see. Because
all
the guests will, of course, also be in video form. They're not going to be a static image below us somewhere or on top of us.
Maybe. So we're trying to...
as a fallback,
Yeah, we do have some. We do try to get guests who align with our values and our atmosphere and that kind of stuff. So that would include video. But if, for example, the guest is coming up for his interview or it's not an interview, but for his design hangout, and his video camera is bursting in flames, then there's going to be a static image.
Unfortunate.
Yes, but in all other cases, there's going to be video.
Or we'll just animate the static images similarly to the promo Photoshop I do every week. Just have to animate the guest faces, and then we'll let some AI run over the image of the mouth, and then the mouth. No, let's not go that far.
Let's not go that far. Okay, that's all right. But that's what's coming up. We have some cool guests coming up. We have thank you for 2,500 listeners, right? And for hanging out with us and putting up with our shit, as they like to say. And
I'm excited for the feedback we're gonna get on the first video episode. Here we have some improvements to make somewhere, but I think as long as our hard drives are not gonna die within the next 5 minutes, then I think it's gonna work out.
But that doesn't, of course, take our focus. I just want to say this for the record. This doesn't take our focus away from our dedicated podcast listener crowd. Just because we have video now doesn't mean that we are suddenly producing this podcast 100% for the video. No, this is still the same. You're still going to enjoy the same show. It's going to be cut a little less tight. So as I mentioned earlier, for example, the little fuck up that I had when I didn't find the German word, that's not something that I'm going to cut out anymore. So this is something, it's more organic. You're going to have more of a personal connection in the audio only side of things. But other than that, it's going to be more of the improved and hopefully a little bit innovated same.
That's beautifully put.
Okay, so
I like that.
Then maybe it's time for your favorite part.
The favorite part, plugging our socials if you want to stay in touch, of course. If you want to head over to Twitter, of course, you can find us at Idiots Industry. And on Instagram, it's the other way around at Industry Idiots, of course. Or in your favorite podcast player, there's always the option to opening the episode details, basically. And then all the links will be there. If you click on them, you'll get redirected directly to where you want to go. So there's that.
So if you're a audio only user, we would still love your subscribe on the YouTube channel, and if you're a YouTube watcher, we would still love your follow on the other channel, just as a show of support. Other than that, we love you either way, and as always, bye.
Bye.